It's honestly refreshing to see Lyney turning out to be such a strong damage dealer, and in this video, I am going to reveal everything you need to know about C0 Lyney, showcase to you his best teams, weapons and artifacts, as well as explain how you can unleash a ton of damage with him. So there's a lot of cool and interesting things about Lyney that I want to talk about, and first I want to showcase his damage and mechanics. Now my Lyney build has the new Hunter set, although the substats here are pretty average if not bad, and he is also equipped with the Viridescent bow. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to raise a free-to-play bow, but Viridescent Hunt's potential is actually really close to something like Prototype Crescent or the new craftable bow, and with the right stats, it actually becomes about the same strength as the other free-to-play options. Also, his talents are raised to level 9, and he is, of course, Constellation 0. So on a first look, Lyney is a charge attack damage dealer. When he fully charges up his shot, which takes about the same time as with Ganyu, he will deal decent damage and summon a Grimalkin cat. This cat actually deals way more damage than the charge shot, and it will also taunt enemies. However, it will take 4 seconds for it to explode, but the cool part here is that if you use another fully charged shot, while the cat is still there, a new one is summoned and the previous cat immediately explodes and deals damage. So it's like a cycle. Use a fully charged shot and explode the previous cat. And I cannot stress this enough, but the cats actually snapshot while the burst doesn't. So for example, if you use a fully charged shot and summon a cat, just when Benny's burst disappears, the next charge shot that removes the previous cat will still deal damage as if it had Benny's boost. And to me, that was pretty surprising to see, when the cats explode and they still hit for a ton of damage even though the buffs are gone. By the way, you'll notice this light pillar sometimes drops on an enemy when he uses his fully charged shot. Well, this is a new attack categorized as pneuma-aligned pyro damage, and it has a 6-second cooldown when you use Lyney's fully charged shot. But to keep it short and simple, enemies who have Usia Surge on them, which is this dark matter emanating from them, if you land this light pillar on them, you will either stun them or disable their mechanics. The damage itself is pretty much negligible, but the ability to disable these new enemies is going to become important later on in the Abyss. Now, in reality, his whole playstyle actually revolves around his skill. You see, anytime he uses his fully charged shot, if he is above 60% health, he will obtain 1 prop arrow surplus stack and lose 20% HP. And you can easily track these stacks right here, and then when he uses his skill, each stack that he had will further increase the skill's damage. It's basically like a finisher move, and you can obtain up to 5 stacks with him. If that's not enough, for each stack he had, he also restores 20% health, so it's super easy to get him back from dying to a living state. And if there was a cat on the field, it will destroy itself and deal damage when you use the skill. So yeah, this is absolutely a finisher move, which can unload a ton of damage and usually heal him back to full health. Now, as for his burst, he will gain 1 prop surplus stack and jump into a big hat, and then for a brief moment, you can move around with him, and similar to Fischl's burst, each time he comes close to an enemy, he can deal damage once. However, when the duration ends, or you end it prematurely by pressing the skill button, he will explode with the giant hat and deal a ton of damage, as well as summon 1 Grimalkin cat. Now, one of the combos I found to work where you can fully explode the skill with 5 stacks is by first starting with Lyney and doing 2 fully charged shots, then swap to other teammates and supports like Bennett and or Animo unit to set up all the buffs and debuffs, come back to Lyney and use 2 more charge shots, which puts him at 4 stacks, and then immediately, the moment you hear his arrow firing off, quickly use the burst, move just enough to do the touch damage, and instantly end it with the skill button, and then finally, mash the skill button for that massive finisher damage. I had some lagging on my server, but I was still able to unleash both Lyney's burst and skill right before Bennett's buff wore off, so it is possible to set up the maximum damage with all the buffs. Like, to me, it's a really fun rotation, but as you can see here, it does require him to have a healer to obtain all the 5 stacks, since if you start with him at full health and he uses 2 fully charged shots, each shot takes away 20% of his health, so you need to find a way to restore the health, which currently can be easily achieved with Benny. On the bright side, as long as he has at least 1 HP point above his 60% threshold, he can still obtain 1 prop surplus stack and drop down to exactly 60% again. Now when it comes to his personal damage, with the new artifact set and really mediocre stats, I was still able to achieve 470,000 damage over 17.5 seconds. Although this does include Benny's buff, but you'll soon understand why Benny is critical for Lyney in order to fully utilize his entire kit. Now, you can also boost his damage with VV Shred or Archaic Petro Zhongli. VV Shred more or less boosts his entire damage by 35%, and with my build, he ends up dealing roughly 610,000 damage. While with Archaic Petro Zhongli, it's a bit lower, but still manages to compete with VV Shred Kazuha. I would say that because most of Lyney's team will be Mono Pyro, Archaic Petro Zhongli actually works really nice here. You can pick up the shard at various times in rotation, so it can be a great alternative compared to VV Shred. But why am I saying that most of Lyney's teams are going to be Mono Pyro? Pyro? Well, it's because of his second passive, which increases his damage by 60% when an enemy has Pyro Aura, and then each other party member other than Lyney in his team can further provide 20% damage increase or up to 100%. This is a significant damage boost, and you'll always want to make sure to maintain a Pyro Aura on enemies, which will be easy if you're playing Mono Pyro teams. One last thing I want to mention is that Lyney is more or less a mix between single target and AoE. Most of the time, both the Charge Shot and the Grimalkin Cat will damage just one enemy, while both the Burst and Skill will damage enemies in a pretty decent radius. So I would say grouping is important for him when you unload two massive damage multipliers. But I am getting ahead of myself here, so let's talk about this more in this next teams and builds segment. Just like in my other showcase videos, keep an eye on the bottom of the screen to see the loadout and stats Lyney has. Now, in a nutshell, Lyney needs Benny Boy to fully utilize his entire kit. The healing from Benny's burst will help Lyney go above the 60% HP requirement, and help him shoot the fully charged shots that reduce his health. Luckily, if you don't have Bennett, he will be a free reward that you can claim from a major event. And so think of this squad that you need to use the same way as you would build Hu Tao's team with Xingqiu or Yelan. But what teams can you build with this duo? Well, you can add Xiangling and go for triple Pyro, with the last character being a Shielder or a VV Shred Animo unit. But as I said before, it can also be Zhongli with Archaic Petra to boost the whole team's Pyro damage when he picks up the shard. So for example, a team with Benny, Xiangling, and Kazuha can dish out a ton of damage, especially in AoE when the enemies are grouped. Unfortunately, since Lyney has no resistance to interruption, it can be a hassle to play him this way. If only there was a Pyro unit that can help with resistance to interruption. Oh wait, what is Dia doing here? Alright, so Dia is actually a pretty decent teammate for Lyney. You can equip on her the Tenacity set, which can now be obtained from the Artifact Strongbox, and with the attack boost she provides, as well as resistance to interruption, this becomes a comfy team to play. Although you are going to lose out on Xiangling, unless you commit to a real Mono Pyro team playing 4 characters from the same elements, but I still recommend using an Animo unit for that sweet resistance shred instead. Also, instead of Dia, you could go for Tang Fei, who can provide a shield from her C4. Just keep in mind her burst is super expensive, so you'll need a couple of Favonius weapons to make this work. Speaking of which, Lyney obtains 5 particles when using his skill, and in general, I would say try to obtain at least 120% ER, because there will be teams where he will only need like 110% if using Kazuha with a couple of Favonius weapons, but with someone like Zhongli, this could easily increase his energy requirements to 140%. But as always, you can work around this by just catching the particles with him from other teammate skills. Also, it's important to note his first passive generates for him 3 flat energy if the fully charged shot consumed his health, which by the way also boosts his Grimalkin Cat damage by 80%. So technically, this should happen almost every time with Bennett. What's also great about him is that the stacks he obtains will linger for a long time, so switching between teammates for him to gather up the energy isn't that much of a deal breaker. You can also go for a team like Reverse Melt. In my opinion, it's not super consistent, but with someone like Rosaria and Layla, you can have this nice combo of shielding and big damage coming from Rosaria's burst. I also kinda like Burning Melt. Since Burning Reaction still counts as Pyro Aura, Lyney's second passive works in a really nice way together with some melting damage. Honestly, you can play around different teams as long as it's Lyney and Bennett together, and I might make a ranking video of Lyney teams sometime in the future to see which comps are the strongest. But so far, I've had best success with Triple Pyro and either VV Shred or Archaic Petra Zhongli. Now, I quickly want to talk about his optimal builds. So far, Hunter's set is his best in slot option, since obtaining 36% crit rate from it and that extra charge attack damage is super valuable. But Fontaine update has just started, and it will take a lot of time and tons of resin to actually obtain decent pieces. So in the meantime, you can easily slap on him 4-piece Wanderers, 4-piece Lava Walker, Bolide, or even DPC, but if you don't have any of these 4 sets, you can just use a mix between 2 sets of Crimson Witch and attack percent. Also, his main stats are really simple. Just go for attack sense, Pyro Goblet, and either crit rate or crit damage circlet. Now, because he will obtain a lot of attack from both Benny's buff and Pyro resistance, as well as a lot of crit rate from the new Hunter set and 19% from his Ascension, you really want like 25 to 30% more critical rate from either a weapon or artifacts, and then the last stat he really cares about is critical damage. Like, I'm trying to build as much crit damage on him as possible, while if I grab any energy recharge on the way, I won't be too sad about this, since it will only make him more flexible in different teams. But when it comes to his weapon options, at the bare minimum, the best free-to-play choice is going to be either Prototype Crescent or the new craftable Song of Stillness. If an enemy has a weak point you can shoot, then R5 Prototype Crescent is the best free-to-play 4-star. But as a reliable option, Song of Stillness will constantly provide that attack boost from passive, because if you play Lyney with Bennett, he will always get healed. There is Blacklift Bow as well, so if you don't care about your star glitter that much, you can go for it too. As for paid 4-stars, the new Cyan Bow is really good on him, but only if fully refined, and Viridescent Hunt offers that nice grouping, and even the white damage it deals, I believe it gets boosted by Lyney's Pyro passive, so that extra 20 to 40k damage is not bad. Obviously, his best in slot is the new Signature Bow, although Aqua Simulacra also comes close to it, as well as Polar Star. But keep in mind for Polar Star, since with the new Hunter set, you can easily cap at 100% crit rate, so he'll need a lot of critical damage to make up for the balance. Otherwise, Thundering Pulse and Skyward Harp are good stat sticks, while Amos Bow is a unique choice you can go for because the passive works both on the Charge Shot and Grimalkin Cat. So what do I think about this guy with stockings? Honestly, I cannot think of a better 5-star to lead Fontaine's start. Like, even though he is basically symbiotic with Benny Boy, the amount of different Mono Pyro or even dual Pyro comps he can build are vast, but I think the best thing that stands out about him is the super fun playstyle, at least to me. Building up those 5 stacks and then unleashing both burst and skill in quick succession often leads to 300k damage with a good build, and his charge attack damage, or should I say Grimalkin Cat that he creates, is also nothing to scoff at. However, the funny thing about him right now is that the current Abyss cycle is completely stacked against him. The first chamber of floor 12 contains a Pyro Herald, and I even tried to use reverse melt comp here, but it's just not fast enough to clear the chamber, while the second side of floor 12 too contains Asimon, and you won't beat it enough without Catalyzed Reaction. So right now, I would say he is pretty bad for this Abyss, since the majority of the team's damage is going to be Pyro. Still, this is going to change pretty soon, but it is interesting to see him in a state like this. And keep in mind that even though I showcased just one of his rotations that I found pretty good, it doesn't mean it's the only way you have to play him. To me, he is a super flexible damage dealer, even though he is mostly limited to Pyro teams with Bennett, but the more I play him, the more interesting things I discover. If I had one final minor complaint about him, then it would be that if you start an Abyss when he has health below 60%, he won't gain stacks until he is healed, which can put a damper on any rotation. So before you finish any Abyss chamber, make sure to use his skill and hopefully that heals him to full health. But all in all, Lyney to me is a superb 5-star and an amazing damage dealer. His playstyle feels super rewarding when you pull off that 5-stack skill explosion. And I think if you can get behind his charge shot playstyle, you will find him rewarding as well. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. I'm already working on Lynette's guide as we speak, and it should be out pretty soon. As always, I would appreciate it if you could press the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.